Hello and welcome to another episode of Badgers Basketball, Battlestar Galactica. We are nearing the end of the season, and as of right now, if I had to make an office comparison for this season, I feel like we are almost getting pranked by Jim. I think the last game was a decent encapsulation of what this season's kind of been. We get to a lot of good things during regulation. We kind of fall into a hole, we come back, we see, you know, contributions from everyone, and at the end, miss on a couple opportunities and don't quite get what we want. But we'll get to more specifics in a little bit. This is recorded on Monday evening on February 27th, so we'll see if anything has changes because there's a couple of time specific things I'll get to in a little bit. And just as a quick reminder, you can catch this podcast on Google and Spotify podcast. You can follow me on Twitter or YouTube at Badgers Basketball BG, and you can email any questions, concerns, ideas, etc. to badgersbasketballbg@gmail.com. So to start things off again, which player gets to choose dinner this week? I'm going to say Connor Essegian, not groundbreaking in that choice by any means. What I will say though is what impressed me most wasn't his 24-point outing against Michigan. In fact, I might put that third on the list in terms of just things that caught my eye. The first was the way he bounced back against Rutgers, excuse me, the way he bounced back against Iowa after the Rutgers game was a lot of fun to watch. I was at the game obviously, and just watching him just kind of walk into the gym and play a game as if he didn't know or didn't care that he didn't hit a shot against Rutgers. He wasn't rushing things, he wasn't forcing shots, he was just playing his game, and he played very well, and was one of the reasons why we were able to get a convincing win against the Hawkeyes. Okay, and then, like I said, while he did score 24 points against Michigan, what I think was impressive and what should excite a lot of Badgers fans is he did that while going 1 for 8 from three. Like, so again, I have lightly touched it on earlier podcasts, but he has uh, exceeded what I thought he could do off the dribble and from two. It's been really, like I said, exciting to watch. I wish we got the win against Michigan because, man, did that guy play good enough for us to win. And just to say the absolute least, he has a bright future. So first, let's just kind of get to this previous week's game. So first, we had Iowa, and so for those of you who maybe weren't aware or weren't at the game, so there was a snowstorm in Madison, kind of in the middle of that game, and or kind of a handful of hours beforehand and next day or so afterwards, and not a ton of people showed up, but in a weird way, the atmosphere was really cool because about, I don't know, 8 or so minutes in, there's a kind of announcement on the stadium, and they said, "Hey, if you're in the second or third level, come down to the lower bowl to any seat that's not taken." And so me and my buddy were on the third level, and we were like, well, "You do not have to tell us twice." So we head down to the first level. One of my buddies got some friends that had tickets down there, as we watched it with them. And then like the atmosphere was kind of was pretty good the rest of the way. I think it helped that we had so many people in the lower bowl, and by no means, I think some fans, well, on the one hand, an electric atmosphere is huge. At the same time, I don't know how much players are really affected by that. But in any case, that was another real, excuse me, another really good defensive game from the Badgers. I'd kind of mentioned in last week's podcast that the Badgers need to control the pace and they need to make Iowa work for their shots because, again, I said this last week, they are not a fast team and that they are crazy athletic and run a bit down the court, but they are fast and that they will have easily five guys always out there that can do something on the offensive end. And so they get shots quickly because they have a good system and they have players that can get good looks. However, I wish I could have like counted the amount of times or had like numbers on the percentages of the amount of times I was shooting the ball with less than 10 seconds to go on the shot clock because they clearly don't do that often and they were doing that consistently against Wisconsin. So I think that was a huge reason for the success our defense had. Now, part of you might be saying, yeah, well, Will, they shot the ball horribly. And like you're right. I think I had written down the stats the UW posted. They were 3 of 28 from three, which is horrendous. That's awful. Um, and like you're absolutely right. And some of those were open shots. Like that's not lie here. as I mentioned though, like Wisconsin made them go deep into the shot clock, and so Iowa all night was not in their rhythm. Does Wisconsin get credit for that? Yes. Did Iowa? They were in the middle of this terrible shooting streak between this game against Wisconsin, their previous game, and Wisconsin took advantage of it. They just absolutely. The, I just the argument that some people might say, well, you can't really give Wisconsin much credit. I don't buy because, like I said, like 3 of 28 does not happen without some good defense on the other end. Um, Now, what I will say is that was lost in this, I think, a little bit is Chris Murray. Um, no, Keegan Murray. No, Chris Murray. Oh my gosh, how am I blanking on this? I'm a little embarrassed to say the least. Let's see. Chris Murray. There we go. For Iowa did not have a good game. He was in foul trouble early, and I think he only played 6 or 8 minutes in the first half, and he only had 27 minutes for the game. And he also went 2 for 10, and there's only one shot I can recall where he was really wide open. It came on the play where Wisconsin's defense had miscommunicated, and he ended up being open for a three, and he missed it. But major good to Tyler Wall, who did a majority of that work. Jordan Davis, I know, also guarded him on some possessions, and I think Klesmit and Crowell on some switches also. So it was obviously a team effort, but there was also some really nice individual efforts against a guy who was a very skilled player. Um, the other two players I mentioned, Tony Perkins and Philip Obracha, played well, but I think, as I said, like we made him work. Perkins had 13 points, but that was on 14 shots. Obracha had 13 points on 10, which is pretty good. He also sat the last, about 10 minutes. I think he had 4 fouls, but I think Fran kept him out because they needed threes by the end, and he's not a 3-point threat. So I don't think he wasn't able to have the effective game he normally would. Okay. And at least on the defensive end, I think we got to give Gilmore some credit because he played 26 minutes, including the last 9 or 10 minutes when Crowell was also out, which kind of was surprising to me because with Rebrach not being in there, I thought to myself, why not put Crowell in and get some nice post up looks. I think the reason ended up being is that with Rebrach being out, their five was I think it was Patrick McCaffrey, if I remember correctly. And I think with Iowa's 3-point shooting ability, which if you watch the Michigan State game on Saturday, I think guard wanted to make sure he had someone like Connor out there. Sorry, not Connor, Carter out there guarding someone who was a little more quick, a little more athletic, and wasn't able to have a um, mismatch kind of in a positive end for them. So, Carter Gilmore, a lot of people like to make him a punch bag this year. He was definitely a huge part in that win. And also our defense, they only shot 4 free throws in the second half. And for a team who's shooting as poorly as they were, that's to not give them any opportunities to see the ball go through the hoop from the free throw line is just an added bonus. Now, for the offensive side of things, our offense continues to be consistently inconsistent. So take that for what it's worth. On the one hand, we shot 52% from the floor. That's fantastic. We did a much better job finishing layups, finishing close shots. I had down here that Tyler Wall and Stephen Crowell combined for 23 points on just 13 shots. I thought both did a really good job playing strong, playing under control, playing off of 2 feet, not leaning or fading one way or the other. And I think Wall had 6 or 8 points really quick off the bat. So clearly making that a priority. Chucky also, I thought, had some nice takes into the lane. Again, playing off 2 feet, playing under control, playing strong. And that clearly made a difference. Like I said, I can't remember the last time we shot over 50% from the floor this season. And we kind of needed it because from three, we shot 22%, which was pretty gross. I think we had 3 straight threes on 3 straight possessions in the second half. And if we didn't do that, I don't know what the percentage would have been. It would have, I mean, obviously worse, but um, we're hitting shots from deep. Um, One thing I also noticed is in the first half, I think the batters had 8 turnovers, which is pretty pretty horrendous for Wisconsin. I think especially the first handful of possessions, we had a couple. And I just remember watching the game and thinking to myself, like, oh no, like, are we going to show up for a home game? You know, bad weather, sparse crowd and just lay an egg, but they really tightened it up. And I think technically they had three in the second half, but they only had one the first 19 minutes. And then the last two, one was Klesmit throwing an ill-advised pass against a press, and the other one was, I think, Wisconsin just taking a shot clock violation to get subs in. So we'll say for all intents and purposes, they had one turnover the second half, which again, based on what they were shooting, they did not have turnovers to give up for possessions. And last thing I'll say about Wisconsin for the Iowa game is I'm impressed with how they finished. We've seen games, and we'll get to one in a second, where they finish disorganized, where they finished inconsistent, where they're not attacking. And in this game, I thought they were purposeful. They did slow it down, but at the same time, like the way you're shooting, the way I was shooting, like absolutely do that. Don't give them extra possessions. And they even though they slowed down, they still attacked. Chucky had a great drop off pass to Carter Gilmore, had a nice, easy layup. So I really was impressed with that. And last thing I'll say about the game in general, because I don't want to be a podcast where I just talk trash about other fans or players or coaches, because I mean, there's too much competitiveness, I think, in the Big Ten to make light or downplay what some of these guys are trying to do. But one thing I will say is I was really kind of, what's the word? I want to say not unimpressed, but maybe disappointed might be a better word, with some of the actions I saw from Philip LaBracha and Connor McCaffrey in that game. There were times when players missed assignments and McCaffrey was pretty aggressive in the way he kind of spoke to his teammates. Now, there's different types of leadership, and I don't know the relationship he has with his teammates, so I don't want to harp on that too much. But again, McCaffrey and Rabacha, there were also times where their body language after fouls, when they didn't go their way, were really negative. And I'm not going to speculate too much on why that might be, but you look at their coach and Fran McCaffrey, and if you saw what he did against Michigan State this Saturday and the franchises we've seen, it's a bummer to see that, because I do respect this Iowa team. I do respect kind of their style of play, and just kind of see this, I guess I can call it whiny behavior, was just kind of a bummer to see. But Wisconsin got the win, and we obviously needed one, so we'll take it. As for the Michigan game, that one hurt to say the absolute least. I remember last week I said a good defensive effort and a respectable shooting percentage might do it, and honestly, it would have, except for you know the way the game ended. And we'll get to that in a second. Real quick here, the first half, despite being down 8, I don't think was terrible. It's just it wasn't as good as we've seen in some recent games. From the defensive side at least, we allowed them to get post up spots for Hunter Dickinson a little too easy, and our help D was inconsistent on some of their drives and skip passes. So they just got a couple too few open looks, both from three and both in drives of the basket. Now, the second half, comparatively, I thought was so much better. We made Hunter Dickinson similarly less effective in the second half by, again, I thought Carl did a great job of moving his feet, working from in front of Hunter Dickinson to kind of like three-quartering him. And again, our defense on the help side in general does a really good job, not allowing them to drive as easily and not giving up easy threes off skip passes or quick reversals. And it led to 8 fewer points. I mean, that's a good defensive effort for the second half, right? We were able to get those 8 points back. Now, offensively, overall, thought we played well. If I'm being nitpicky, I would like us to get more free throw attempts. Although I can't argue with the free throw percentage. I think we missed one in regulation. Um, However, in the first half, there was just, I mean, when people complain about a drought that Wisconsin will go, they're totally allowed to do that. Like, it is also frustrating for me when you see Wisconsin go 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes without scoring a bucket. I think what you also have to look at is, like, are we getting good looks? Are we getting good shot attempts? Are we getting opportunities to score where you can look at and say, yeah, like that is what I want my team to get? And I thought we were. I thought we were getting shots that were efficient. We were getting shots that I have seen us make plenty of times before, right? However, in the first half, we were 38% from the floor, didn't shoot any free throws, and I mean, we had a deficit because of it. You know, you gotta. I've said this a lot this year. Like, there's only so much you can do scheme wise, but you got if you have an open shot, you got to make some of them at least. Got to make some of them. Now, all this might be moot for some because I think what a lot of people say is all that really matters is that last possession. And based on what anyone has seen or heard from Twitter or any message board or really anyone that has talked about this game that saw it, like I said, there's some strong opinions on it. So let's just look at that last possession. With about 8 seconds left, Michigan has to go the length of the court. And I thought I saw this during the game, but I didn't really pay much attention to it. But I rewatched it this morning, and it looks with about 5 or 6 seconds left. Kamar McGee tries to foul Michigan guard Doug McDaniel. I think he tried to do it multiple times. However, it didn't get called. I also saw that Greg Gard after the game said, quote, "We were trying to foul up the floor coming up in the last, 7 or 8 seconds." Further went on to say, "I don't know what we need to do to get a foul to the borderline of tackling," end quote. And I think, and this is, some people are blaming coaching for this, and I can't. Like, he told him to foul. I thought McGee did foul him. In that situation, I guess you just have to make it so obvious that the ref can't call it. Because honestly, I don't think a ref wants to call that situation. So you can't have a little hand check. You can't have a little touch and grab there. You have to foul the guy. Some people might think that's a cop out answer. At the same time, like, I mean, watch the play. McGee fouled him. He was grabbing his arm, hacking his arm. Like, maybe I'd be more blatant, but I can't be too upset with that from at least from the coaching perspective, even a player perspective. I thought McGee tried to do it anyway. He ends up getting a really nice pass to Brifkin, and Max Klesmit gets up and blocks a shot, which was one of his two huge blocks near the end of the game for Max. So shout out to Max. I did not know you had that in you. That was fantastic to see. All right, and then the out of bounds play with 2 seconds left. The amount of people I hear say you got to foul there. I don't. I mean, in hindsight, yeah, but you got to assume they're looking for something going toward the hoop so a player can catch it in rhythm and shoot. And very few players are going to catch that thing and not think shoot right away. So if you're thinking foul right away, that's just ask and give them 3 free throws. So when guard said stay between them and the hoop, wall up, honestly, like, I would say the same thing. And if any of you really disagree with me, I'd love to hear your take in hindsight, or excuse me, with hindsight removed, because 2 seconds isn't much time, and I don't know if it's fair to expect a player to foul there. Now, it did sound like Guard didn't want players to make the play like Jordan Davis did. He said, quote, "We made a play on the ball we shouldn't have made," and went on to say, "Stay between him and the rim. That's the only way he gets an open look for three." So again, I would argue that's good coaching, because if Jordan Davis sees a pass come his way and just gets right in front of Dickinson and walls up, maybe the shot doesn't go in. I mean, you don't really know, but maybe it doesn't. At the same time, I have a really hard time getting upset with Jordan Davis. I mean, he's not like a freak athlete, but he is athletic. Sees a pass, he thinks he can get, and he makes a play on it. I mean, there's so many things that had to go right for Michigan and wrong for Wisconsin in that situation, and they all worked. I am very frustrated it happened the way it did. I don't know if I can sit here and point a finger at Jordan Davis and say this is your fault, because he tried to make a play that I think was within his wheelhouse to make. All right. Last thing I'll say on that little transition there is Matt Norlander from the Ion Basketball Podcast with Gary Parrish. He thought it could have been a 5 second call, and I didn't even think of or notice that. And when I looked at the play this morning, I was like, yeah, that excuse me, that should have been a 5 second call. However, I'm not going to blame the refs. I don't think I'll ever really blame the refs. I'll complain about the refs sometimes, but there's just too much happens in a basketball game, and there are too many kind of inconsistent calls in the game as it goes on for me to sit here and say the refs cost us that one. So if any refs are listening to this, I got your back. Your job's hard. All right. And then obviously we lost the game in OT, which was a major bummer. We shot 2 for 9. They shot 5 for 6. I mean, you can't let a team be that efficient. Well, I mean, regardless how efficient you are, you can't let a team make 5 or 6 of their shots in overtime. You're not going to ever win an overtime game like that. Um, and I just think with my only takeaway with that is this overtime is a situation where if we had someone that we could have just thrown into the post and can consistently score, or someone we can run an isolation or a pick and roll for, that would have been really nice in overtime. But this roster isn't quite built like that. Um, so you don't have that, and then you don't shoot in overtime well, and you don't get stops. It's recipe for disaster. All right, now for that game, we're not really in a position for moral victories. It's late in the season. We are on the absolute edge of making the tournament or not. So while I won't call this a moral victory, maybe we'll call it a moral growth or a moral improvement if we want to be optimistic about it. We, without our starting point guard, Chucky Hepburn, who was our leading scorer for essentially the entire second half, and for all intents and purposes, completed a comeback on the road. I will quick add here, I haven't heard any updates from or about Chucky Hepburn. And I'm not enough of a medical expert to make any sort of guess on what happened or what we can expect to happen going forward because just not my wheelhouse. Um, so I want to give a shout out to the team in general for responding. I thought like I said, I mentioned earlier, I thought their defensive effort in the second half was fantastic. I thought we got good contributions from a ton of different guys. I mean, shout out to Kamari McGee for coming in off the bench and giving really good minutes. Didn't really shoot the ball well, but I thought played really good defense and kept the offense moving in a good direction. Max Klesmit might have had one of his best games as a Badger. He had 19 points on just 12 shots. He also chipped in with 2 rebounds, an assist, 2 blocks, and 2 steals, all with no turnovers, all while also guarding their best wing in Buffkin most of the game. So, I mean, shout out to him. And I mentioned his 2 blocks earlier, specifically near the end of regulation. Like that might not even go to overtime without Max in the first place. So, shout out to Max. And some people might want to hear this, but you're going to. I think we got to shout out Greg Gard and the coaching staff for developing and keeping faith and having patience with Kamari McGee. I think when people first saw the transfer, they were excited because he had a really nice finish to his freshman year in Green Bay. And let's be just totally blunt, outside the last couple of games, he hasn't contributed a ton. He had a couple nice minutes against Marquette, but I mean, I've seen people say some weirdly negative things about the pickup, but this this I think is looking to be a nice Pearl pickup. So, like I said, not a moral victory, but a moral something. Okay. All right. On to this weekend, some big picture stuff. If you follow me on Twitter, you would have noticed a list of games I tweeted on, it was either Friday evening or Saturday morning. Don't remember. It was Friday afternoon or Friday evening. Pretty much saying, hey, if you're a Wisconsin fan and if you are trying to figure out what's going to be best for our postseason chances, opportunities, here's all these games that I would like to have happen in terms of who wins and who loses. And a lot of them could have happened both in just metrics before the game, and a lot of them could have happened just over the time span of during the game. And this was a crazy weekend of college basketball, and a lot of those crazy endings affected games Wisconsin fans wanted to go otherwise, obviously including the one that we were playing in against Michigan. So I would just like to say I am not claiming responsibility for this. However, if you think I am at fault, I made another list and posted it on Twitter today for the next, let's see, Monday to 4 days. So let's see what happens with this list. And if it's similarly bad, I will stop. But I'm not going to apologize yet. Okay. Continuing the talk of Wisconsin's postseason tournament chances, I did some digging on some of our metrics. This mostly has to do with the net, which is something I'm not. Well, first of all, as of February 27th, the Badgers were 72 in the net, which isn't great. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the net, not because Wisconsin doesn't look good with the net right now. I think there are a lot of people who have frustrations with the net, and it's just there's some inconsistencies that can't have consistent answers or can't have kind of quote unquote logical answers. The things that will make you say like that makes no sense because you'll see one like for example, Ohio State is still ranked ahead of Wisconsin in the net by like 15 spots. Like they would still be like our win against them when they were home was a quad one win. Now I like that quad one win and I'm going to keep it. However, that makes no sense that if you beat Ohio State when they're home versus Wisconsin when we're home, that it's worth more for Ohio State. I think this metric puts too much in margin of victory, but I don't know the ins and outs of the what's we're looking for of the metric itself, I guess you could say to have specifics. So that's what we'll just start this with. Um, quick water break, 1 second. All right. Um, now the about let's see, this has been 9 days ago, about a week and a half. The NCAA released like their top 16. This is kind of like if the season ended today, here would be the top 16 teams in the tournament. Something they started a handful of years ago. They don't ever update it, just a one-time thing. And there are things that happened in that reseeding that gives me optimism for Wisconsin. For example, Tennessee was number 3 in the net, but they dropped to number 9 in the seeding. UConn and St. Mary's are both top 10 teams in the net and weren't even in the top 16 in the seeding. That's only it's a couple data points. That's generally, I would say, good news. Okay. One quote that was kind of described the committee's choices, and I can't remember if it was someone's kind of evaluation of what they did, if it was one of the actual committee members themselves, but the quote was importance of high-end road wins. And Wisconsin has a couple nice high-end road wins, namely Marquette. That's the big one. But we also got road wins over tournament teams like Iowa, over a quad one team like Ohio State, I guess, of another bubble team like blanking right now, Penn State. So, and we can talk about the games we've missed out on, but we got a couple nice road wins. So we'll hope that pays off dividends for us. Okay. And other metrics that I was looking for a strength of schedule. They have us at 22. However, there seems to be multiple different locations that have a strength of schedule. So 22 seemed to be a common number that I was seeing for a couple of these. So I'm trying to figure out if there's like an official one that the NCAA bracket committee goes off of. And then for quad one, we are 6-6, quad two, 4-5, quad 3-4, combined for 6-1. I think that quad two is what hurting us the most. If that 4-5 instead, if that was say, even if that was like 6-3, totally different season. All right, quick pivot. For those that don't know, the Wisconsin women's team beat number 12 Michigan yesterday, and the Wisconsin's women's team, while still overall kind of a bummer of a season, are kind of turning a corner to the end of the year here. I went to a game earlier against Northwestern. They had a nice lead most of the game, couldn't hold on to it and lost. However, they have won 3 straight now and 4 of 5, including beating Northwestern when they were at Northwestern a couple games ago. They finished, excuse me, finished the regular season 500 at home, and they're going to return 3 of their top 5 scorers next year, unless there's something weird happens in the transfer portal, including true freshman Sarah Williams, who I think is worth going to a Badger game just to see her play. She has a nice game, kind of an old school post player, fantastic touch around the hoop. Um, really got a nice bright future between her and Connor Season. Both programs on the basketball team for Wisconsin got some bright spots. All right, on to this next week of games. Wisconsin's last 2 of the year. First up, we got Purdue, which is this Thursday at 8 p.m., which is senior night. First thing I'm going to say is 2-ish months ago, month and a half, not really sure exactly when it happened. I was listening to another kind of national basketball podcast, and this is when Purdue at the time was kind of running away with the Big Ten and was at the time the hands down best team in the country. And someone asked an analyst, like, can anyone be Purdue, or what's it going to take to be Purdue? And not word for word, because didn't write down an exact quote, but he said essentially, if a team is a good 3-point defending team and can work hard to get Edie off the block, they have a chance to beat Purdue. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, well, Wisconsin is really good at 3-point defense. And, Wisconsin beat Purdue and Edie last year. Granted, that was with Chris Vogt as a backup, but Crowell is a much improved post defender compared to last year. And so I got to just kind of put that aside because I thought to myself, like, that sounds loosely like Wisconsin. And then I also just kind of think about how with our offense, it oftentimes revolves around Steve being kind of in the top of the key, being almost a distributor. Wisconsin has a chance. Okay. I don't know if we're actually going to do it, but Wisconsin has a chance. Now, having said that, there's also reasons to be like, well, I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen because A, we don't know if Chucky's going to be back. And B, like even if we do play good 3-point defense, like we're gonna need to shoot well on offense, and that's been inconsistent at best lately. We don't need to shoot like over 50% from the field, or excuse me, we don't have to shoot over 50% from the three. Like for example, Connor can't have a game where he goes 1 for 8, So it'd be nice for him to get back on track a little bit. And we're still gonna need to score in the paint a little bit. I think we outscored Michigan in the paint in both games that we've played them recently. And I'm also pretty sure we outscored Iowa in the paint. But between Wall and Crowell, even like our guards, like we're gonna need to get some buckets in the paint to kind of like keep Purdue honest. Okay. And so again, these are all things that can happen. And I've seen us do this year. It's just Wisconsin hasn't put it all together that often this season, as anyone listening to this podcast knows. Now, other reasons for optimism, our rebounding, while has not been good this year, has improved the last couple of games, especially in the offensive end. Um, we don't need to win that set against Purdue, and I don't think we will because Purdue, I think they're the best rebounding team in the country. They have one of the highest rebounding percentages, both on the offensive and defensive end. So that's just it's not a stat I'm expecting us to win. But also our free throw shooting has been better the last handful of games. I would still like us to get more attempts, but at this point, I'm going to take what we can get. So, like I said, there's a lot of kind of narratives that weirdly I think work in Wisconsin favor. All I'm going to say is I cannot wait for Thursday night. It's going to be senior night. We'll see if Wall is celebrated or not. And if you are going to that game, be early and be loud. All right, let's get this one. All right. Lastly, we got Minnesota, and I'm just be tough to be a Minnesota fan right now. They are currently on a 12 game losing streak, which obviously isn't great. Um, this will be senior night for them. I actually don't know how many seniors they have because of the transfer portal. Um, but I was speaking of kind of transfer portal and their player development and movement. Their coach is currently in the doghouse with some fans. He had a kind of a nice duo of recruits coming in. One being depending on what list you go to, but he was kind of a 24/7 has this like composite ranking. He was a top 40 player in the country, kind of an athletic center out of California, Dennis Evans, and he requested the release from his um, national letter of intent. So their recruiting class took a major hit. So I'm not sure what the level of optimism is for that coaching staff. We'll see. Um, if you remember the same from last time, Dawson Garcia and Jamison Battle are their two main dudes. And one second here, I need another water break. Sorry. All right. So I was looking at some of their stats, and Dawson Garcia and Jamison Battle combined take 39% of Minnesota's shots. That's a ton. Now, actually, I wish I would have looked it up for Wisconsin to see how we compare. But it just seemed like a very skewed distribution. And if you include Talon Cooper, who, by the way, I like that guy. He's a guard for Minnesota. Um, he's not their only like threat from three, but he's the only one who's shooting above 33% that shoots a significant amount of them. But I remember he had a good game against Wisconsin the first time around. But if you include him, those three players take 55% of their shots, which again, that's such a huge number. So we'll see what happens from those guys. But on the flip side, though, they have the Pharrell Payne, who's kind of he's a freshman or sophomore, I can't remember, but he's shooting like 60% from two. So I mean, and he played well against us last time too. So he's another guy to look out for. Now, for anyone who's watched them play at all, and like by no means I've watched every game of theirs, but I've watched, a handful. They have moments where they look solid. Like I'm not gonna say they look great. I don't think I've ever seen them. I think to myself, oh, yeah, that could be a tournament team. But they've looked solid. Like I said, they got some good pieces. And at times, like when they kind of can run their offense, but it can be centered around a couple of them, like they got some things going for them. But it's just not consistent enough. Um, I'll just say this. The more I thought about this game and kind of looked at some of their numbers, like I feel like this game will almost just start off like the Nebraska game, like right before the Nebraska game went south. If we take a foot off the pedal against this team, like we don't know what can happen. Like they made us come back last time. Like we can beat this team and we can control this game. But if we give them an inch, they got guys that can turn that inch into a foot, into a yard, a mile, whatever you want to call it. Okay. And also, plus, like this is Wisconsin, Minnesota. It's a border battle, last regular season game of the season. Like, who knows this game? All right. What I will say though is we were without Tyler Wall the last roughly 30 minutes of the first time around, and we kind of let them make a comeback. Okay. So I don't think it's going to happen this time, especially with kind of the frustration this team has been through this season. Okay. So the last thing I'll say for this game is just keep the foot on the pedal, and we'll be okay. All right, that'll do it for today. As a reminder, you can catch this on Google or Spotify. You can follow me on Twitter or YouTube at Badgers Basketball BG. Hope everyone's a great night, and let's hope for a good Wisconsin basketball week. Bye, everyone.